Very cool. Hey guys, welcome to the first ever Google Academy Hangout. This launches our Student Filmmaker Week, which culminates in the Student Academy Awards on Saturday. So today we have some Student Academy Award winners, some screenwriters from our Google Plus community, and sitting down with John August to ask some questions about the creative process as well as sort of launching their career. So the way it's going to work today is that I'm going to introduce the lovely John August. Then we're going to have our folks inside our chat introduce themselves and ask a couple questions. We'll do it a couple times, and then we'll roll out for the day. Awesome. So I'm going to flip it to John. John, you know from his screenwriting work and many collaborations with Tim Burton, including Frankenweenie, as well as his huge podcast, Script Notes, and his very popular blog that I read all the time. So, John, I'm going to let you take it away. Thank you very much for having us.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to welcome our Student Academy Award folks and the community. I talk a lot about screenwriting both on the blog and on the podcast, and so this is a chance to answer some questions live and real and on video. I'm happy to do it. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you guys. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves so we can find out who you are.
So let's start with Gary.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gary. I'm a first-year screenwriting student at UCLA Film School, the graduate program. And I'm from Boston. I was born in the Soviet Union. Came here when I was 4 years old, but I was raised in America. So yeah, I write. Trying to get more into television right now, into sort of comedy / dramedy. And I'm a big fan of Script Notes. Listen to that a lot, and yeah, that's. Hope to hear some more of it.
Great.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. We're going to flip over to Jenna.
Hi, I'm just introducing myself, right?
Yeah, that's what we're doing first.
Okay, cool. So hi, I'm Jenna Westover. I also go to UCLA, although I'm an undergraduate screenwriting concentration. I grew up in Chicago. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a couple years and moved down here 9 months ago, and it's been a big switch. I come from a journalism background, and I'm really enjoying it, though. I've always loved to write, and it's been a very positive experience, and I'm so happy to meet you, and I also love Script Notes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, and then we're going to move over to Jonathan. Oh, Jonathan, looks like your mic is off.
Hi.
Ah, there you go.
Hi. I'm Jonathan Lonergan. I went to USC, and my thesis film, Just Feeding the Roach, is one of the narrative winners, same category as Jenna and Brian, apparently. Yeah, from Minnesota to LA via New York. So, yep, that's me.
Great.
Oh, Gary froze.
All right, so kind of coming in and out.
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay. So, can I start with a question, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is kind of geared about Script Notes, and I don't know if I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. Basically, my question is, how has Script Notes, since you started doing the podcast, how has it in any way influenced your personal career as a screenwriter? Have you gotten any like more attention or more jobs? Or like when you have meetings with executives, are they like, oh, I love the podcast, and sometimes I notice you say stuff and I'm very surprised you and Craig both talk about things in the podcast that I'm like, wow, I can't believe they're actually saying that in public. I'm like, wouldn't that get them in trouble with somebody? And so yeah, I guess my question is, like, overall, since the podcast started, how has that sort of changed your career?
Great. So for people who don't know, the podcast I do is called Script Notes, and it's with Craig, who's another screenwriter. And we've been doing it for 94 episodes now. We do it every week. And it was really a chance to talk about some things that I've been blogging about, but a blog is really is a monologue, and it was a chance to actually have a dialogue about some things, because my opinion is my opinion, but it's not always necessarily the right opinion, and being able to talk things through is really, really helpful. what's been strange, so we have a lot of listeners, and so it's hard to keep really good metrics on sort of podcasts because it's all sort of a new form, but about 200,000 people download the show every week, which is great. So those can't all be aspiring screenwriters. I think it's sort of drawn beyond people who are just interested in film overall. What's strange, though, is like I feel like a lot of times people that I'm meeting with aren't listening to the podcast, and so it's just sort of a whole separate world. So there's a bunch of people who are aspiring screenwriters or who work on TV staffs who read our show, who listen to our show, but the actual executives we're meeting with generally have no idea that I have a podcast or that this is something that I'm doing on a weekly basis. Where I've gotten really out of it is just the chance to, and it's like a weekly therapy session, to sort of talk through the stuff that I'm going through as a writer, sort of how I feel about issues, and just get a different perspective on things. I really enjoy, especially the 3-page challenges we do, where we take, people will send in 3 pages of their script, and we'll look at them and we'll talk through sort of what they're doing in those 3 pages and really get specific on craft stuff, which is a hard thing to do unless you have paper in front of you to do it. So I've gotten a lot out of it.
Cool.
That's fantastic. Jenna, what's your
Hi.
question?
So I actually have a different question. It's not about script notes. I just have a very general question, which is kind of about starting out. I, like Gary, would also love to be involved in writing for television. I love family dramas. 6 Feet Under and The Sopranos totally grabbed my heart. I'm wondering what your insights are, especially after having just moved here and I'm really just starting to sink my teeth into it. Did you ever feel like there was a period of your life where you were sort of paralyzed by the fear of not being good enough, or you knew how to craft things, being paralyzed by being a perfectionist or something? And if so, how did you cut through that?
Well, I think there's actually 2 phases you go through. There's that fear that you're not good enough, and there's that moment which you sort of do kind of break in, and you have some success, and you realize you have the fear of oh no, I'm an imposter, and they're going to find out that I'm actually not good enough. So that doesn't ever really go away. What I would say is great about television is television at least has a track system, and so there's a way you sort of progress up through television that is so different than features. Features, totally. You could just be a spec writer for forever and eventually sell something and then sort of get hired to do more stuff. Whereas in TV, you have a sense of are you on a track in television? Because
right.
Are you on a staff? There's a tradition of sort of being the writer's assistant in a room and then eventually getting that one episode and then getting hired as a staff writer and sort of working your way up through. And you can learn a lot because you're surrounded by writers all the time. In features, you're not surrounded by writers. And that's one of the reasons why I've always sought out things like the Austin Film Festival or other chances just to be around other feature screenwriters, because we always work in isolation.
Absolutely.
And at television, you're around other people all the time, and that's an amazing opportunity. So
yeah,
I envy you mostly because you're entering a time when television 1-hour dramas are the best they've ever been. And so this is the golden age of the 1-hour drama. I plead to you as an Academy member, don't forget features, because we need you to write features as well.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Jonathan?
Hi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about collaboration with directors. Because as a director, sometimes our tendency is to be very controlling, but it's also important to keep in mind that it's just to keep the creativity from the screenwriter flowing freely. And I was wondering if you had any advice for directors on how to do that. Yeah,
and I'm not sure who said this originally. I credit Aline Brosh McKenna, who's very smart, but there's other smart people who may have said this too. You have to remember that the screenwriter is the only person who's already seen the movie. And so you, as a director, you're sitting down, you're reading the script, but that screenwriter saw the whole movie in his or her head, and so has a vision for what that is. And the challenge of collaborating with screenwriters and directors is having this vision that's in one person's head and sharing it between 2 people's heads. And so if your vision as a director is not what the screenwriter's vision is, it's finding that common ground so it can fit both of your heads. The successful collaborations I've had have talked less about sort of somebody telling me how to write something, and more what wasn't working for them, so I can give them what they need. And I found as I directed movies, as I worked with any department head, as much as I tried, I might know a fair amount about editing or a fair amount about cinematography, but that's not my forte. So I try to talk in sort of general terms about what I'm going for and let them figure out how to give me what I'm going for. I think the same holds true with screenwriters, is making sure that collaboration is recognizing what they're going to be great at and letting them come up with the solutions to the issues that you're having.
That's fantastic. Do you feel like there's a significant, are you going to direct more? Do you feel like there's a significant difference in time and effort between writing and directing after you've done?
The luxury for a screenwriter is that I can write 4 movies in a year, and as a director I could maybe direct half a movie in a year. And so as a person who wants to make a lot of stuff, screenwriting is a really good choice for me. But I'm never the final artist on any movie that I write. And also, you know, I can write all these things that never become movies. And so part of the reason why I think I'll be back towards directing soon is that it's a chance to actually sort of see something get finished and get finished the way you want it to get finished. So I've loved writing movies for other people, but I'm writing something for myself now, which hopefully this next year I'll get to direct.
Awesome. Fantastic. Gary, we're going to flip it to you again.
All right. So my next question is, and I don't know if you've gotten this one before. I'm guessing you have, but writer's block. Have you ever gotten it? And how do you deal with it? Like sometimes you just wake up one day and you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have nothing to contribute to the story. I'm totally confused. Everything's upside down. How do you sort of fix that situation if you get it?
Yeah, I've never had that kind of writer's block where you always see in movies where like they're sitting on a typewriter and they're typing things. It's a dark and stormy night, and then they rip it out. And what's so weird is that we see that scene in so many movies, and yet it's not a thing that actually happens, I think, in real life. What I do find is that most times I don't want to sit down and write because I'd rather do almost anything other than write, because writing sucks. And writing is just torturous to do a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And especially starting to write is torturous. And yet we romanticize writer's block because we don't talk about like accountant's block or secretary's block. Like there's a lot of jobs where you don't sort of really want to go do them, but you know you have to go do them. Where I found it's helpful is to focus on little small things I can achieve. And so sometimes that means I may not want to tackle that giant scene, but I'll tackle that really easy little scene, which is sort of walking a character through a door, and I'll just get started that way. The classic techniques are always, when you are finding good stuff, when writing is flowing really well, to stop when you still have a little bit left in the tank. I'll often sort of beat out the next couple things that are happening in the scenes ahead, so that when I get started the next time, I'm not staring at a blank, section of screen. I actually have some stuff in there to fill in. But it's hard every time. Every time I start to write a new script, I think I'm never going to finish it, and that never goes away.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and just a follow-up question to that. Do you have like a writing? Do you have like a schedule per se, like a certain amount of hours per day that you work every day, or is it kind of like sporadic?
I'm in my office from 10 to 6, but I don't spend that whole time writing. I'm doing a lot of other stuff, and part of the reason why I do the podcast and the blog is so I can have an excuse for why I'm in the office rather than spending time with my family. What I do find is when I'm really writing on something, I will try to keep a little bit more regular hours, and I'll try to just set myself a page count. So I'll say, like, I'm going to write 5 pages every day. And I sometimes will resort to like terrible tricks where like I'll make a contract with myself. If I don't write 5 pages every day for this whole week, then I will donate money to a horrible charity or just do something. I will make it bad on myself if I don't do that. Because sometimes writing is just wonderful and lovely, and it's a fantastic process, but sometimes it is just awful work. And I do find that if I write the endings of things pretty early in the process, it's much easier for me to fill in towards the middle, because I know that it'll get done, and I won't have that panic about how this is all going to resolve.
That's fantastic. I love that you have to give money to a horrible charity. And I secretly want that list after this Google Hangout is over.
So if anyone wants to do that, there's a secret to do it, is that you can actually donate anonymously through other sort of services, so it'll never get traced back to me. And so then I always have to offset that donation to like the equivalent good charities. It's not a healthy thing I do, but it's gotten some things written.
That is awesome. Jenna, what's your next question?
So actually, I had the writer's block question, but I had another question that's somewhat similar, which is something that you touched on earlier. What do you do about being in isolation? Like, how do you craft things that are big-hearted and genuine and real? Because I know that you do, because Big Fish makes me cry every time, no question. So how do you do it? Like, how do you kind of like reverse engineer human emotions well isolated?
Um, I'm very method in a way that I wouldn't have expected as a kid. But for the Big Fish, for example, I made myself cry, and so I would sit in front of the mirror and bring myself to tears, and then I wrote through those last 15 pages of the script. And it was literally just it was a week of sort of like killing everything I loved and sort of getting those tears out, and it came through it. And the stuff that I've written that's really scary, I've tended to terrify myself and then write what that felt like. And so you try to capture the feeling of being that emotional, being that scared in the writing. And then you just, you let people read it. And that's the most terrifying thing about writing is that because it's such a, solo process,
Yeah.
Eventually you have to share it with people and you have to see whether it works in their head, so the same way it works in your head. And eventually, you discover what's going to work and what's not going to work. But even, 20 years into this, I don't always know. And there's things which I'm convinced are going to work exactly the way I want them to work, and they just don't land for people. And that's
Right on. That's an awesome answer. Thank you. I can't believe that that's how the end of Big Fish was written. Now I know.
We're doing the Broadway musical version of Big Fish right now.
Yeah.
And to get through those last sections, my first time really collaborating with somebody on a writing project. And so Andrew Lippa, the lyricist composer, and I finally just sat him down and I said, "But Andrew, we're going to start talking and we're going to start crying, and then we're going to write that last song." And that's how we did it, and it worked. And it's an amazing moment in the show, but I think it's because we were feeling what we needed to be feeling as we were writing it.
For sure. That's super awesome. Thank you.
Is adapting Big Fish for the musical version a lot different than sort of writing it as a movie, or is this your first musical?
This is my first stage musical. So I've done Charlie and Chocolate Factory,
Right.
essentially musical, and Corpse Bride, and even the original Big Fish, I had a musical number in there that I wrote. But this is the first time writing for the stage, and it's been great. It's been much more collaborative than I've ever had to deal with in mostly the best possible ways. The challenge is that it's never finished. And so at least with a script, you're done for a while, and then you can move on to something else. Or with a movie, you have your cut, and you can show that cut, but then eventually you're finished. And I've come to terms with the fact that I'll just never be finished with Big Fish, because we're now doing the revisions before we go to Broadway in the fall. And even when we're open on Broadway, in success, we'll have to figure out what it's like on a tour. If it doesn't succeed wildly, then we'll have to figure out sort of what the next incarnation of it is. And that's a challenge too. Even as we had it on stage in Chicago for 5 weeks, we were making changes along the way, and it's like trying to fix a train that's moving 100 miles per hour. It was a completely different skill set than what I was used to.
Awesome. Jonathan?
I had a question about representation. I'm kind of getting to the point where I need to, I've kind of chosen a manager, but now I need to figure out which agent to go with. So I was wondering if you had any advice on that, and like what to keep in mind and what to expect once you do get an agent.
I would remind you that these are agents and managers and lawyers are people that you're going to have to deal with for years, and so make sure they're people you want to be on the phone with and that you want to have in your life. Because sometimes you think like, well, I want the big, scariest agent you could possibly get. Well, you don't want an agent who you don't actually want representing you. Who doesn't feel like someone who you'd want to invite into your home. The other thing to keep in mind is that agents and managers, they're there to help put you in rooms to talk with people and sort of get you started on projects and get you meeting people. But they're not actually going to be making movies, and they're not actually going to be getting you jobs. What they're going to be doing is sort of establishing relationships and negotiating contracts. But you are responsible for your own destiny, and whatever you want to make, whatever you want to work on, it's going to be your decisions and your relationships that make that happen, not someone else's.
Well, that is incredibly helpful, and I think we're actually going to wrap up for the day. for Google Hangout. Thank you very much for being part of it. Everything worked technically perfectly, and fantastic. And Jen, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. And the advice you gave to the kids was fantastic. Thanks, guys, for hanging in the hangout with us.
Thank you.
I'll see you
Good luck,
at
everyone.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks.
Cool.
Bye, thank you.
Be sure to come back Thursday for our hangout with Jennifer Todd, and I will see the rest of these Student Academy Award winners here in town this Saturday. Thanks, guys.
Great.